Hey, I'm Hannah Mae, and this is my reaction template video over the second chapter of this book, and it's called High Energy Society. In this chapter, we learn the difference between power and energy and how we use it in our day-to-day lives, especially in today's society, which is a lot more modern, and how it has evolved, blah blah blah. And it also shows us how important energy resources are, like fossil fuels, nuclear power, renewable energy, stuff of that stuff of nature. And we learn how energy consumption and quality of life are actually linked. I had no clue that the more energy consumption or the perfect amount of energy consumption actually goes along with our quality of life. Um, but also we learn about GDP and HDI and how their measurements of quality of life in their own manner, and we'll talk about that later in this video, and how actually energy consumption, while energy is good and can help quality of life, it actually, once it gets to a certain point and it exceeds that point or becomes excessive, it can actually be harmful to the people, environment, economy, everything. The first section that we get to is called Energy and Power. Um, in this, it basically just tells us the difference between the two of them, power and energy. And power is measured in watts, which is the rate in which energy is actually used, and energy is the total amount that is consumed over time. We know power is the rate that energy is used. Watts is actually the rate when you convert stored energies, when we eat food and stuff like that. It's in our bodies, and it turns into mechanical energy, with motion and how we move. And I never knew that before. I didn't know it had to be converted, really. And then actually I should have known this when I read it, because I've always been told my whole life that you need to eat calories in order to have enough energy to function, blah blah blah. Calories are actually energies in foods that get within us. One of the craziest things that stuck out to me the most in this chapter is how the average rate of energy in a human body is 100 watts, and that's how much we give off every day. And I'm sitting here right now, and there's energy in me, that's insane. Um, but I've been an athlete since such a young age, literally first grade is when I started playing my first sport, and it was insane to me that it was talking about how athletes can expend energy up to hundreds or even thousands of watts of energy, and that's insane. How can one give off that much energy or have that much energy in their body? It's that's crazy to think about how our bodies can withstand that much energy. I didn't know we could really. um but it's crazy. I thought that was something I love to learn about. The next section is called your energy workers. This section is just talking about how we use energy to support our day-to-day lives, especially in today's society. Um, and it talks about how energy is used both directly and indirectly, and how it goes even past just our personal needs, but it to power our industries and our just everything in society basically. I didn't know that energy could be used in different ways. Well, obviously I did, but I'm talking about directly and indirectly. I didn't think, I just thought it was all used the same way. But now that I'm reading, it makes more sense. Directly is when you light our houses, heating and cooling that we have in our houses, technologies that we use every day, basically just the household needs that we have. Indirect things are we transport foods back and forth, on food trucks or materials. In the supermarkets, you see the big walls of different foods that need to be cooled, and the freezers, and I'm mostly talking about the things that have the vegetables and stuff lined up the thing. That's just what I think of. Those that have to be cooled, that's using energy. Um, Agriculture, I didn't know really you needed energy for that, but obviously you do. And then manufacturing, of course, that's a big one. The next section is actually called your energy workers' jobs. In this, it just talks about like the different ways that energy is divided in America and how like it says that there's up to 100 energy workers, figuratively speaking, of course. It just talks about how there's such a high demand for energy and how it's like needed to support our modern life now. And but back to the 100 energy workers, it's split up into three different things. It's into industrial, transportational, and residential. They all like industrial has 21 out of 100, transportation is 45 out of 100, and residential is 34. So all three of those add up to the 100 energy workers. Um, and then like it just talks about how we need energy to support life, and in order to lower this consumption of energy that we use, we would have to take both direct and indirect actions to do so. There's different like the different countries use energy for different reasons. Like we use it more for transportation than Europe or Japan does per se. And like the colder countries and stuff, like they'll have to use energy to like for heating and stuff. And that's also crazy. Like it's interesting because I thought we all used energy the same way and like it would just be just needed, like in the same ways, but like obviously not now that I've learned about it. Um, we also reduce energy, like reduce energy like directly. One of the things is just simply turning off your light, like when you leave your house or when you're like laying down and all your rooms in your house have lights on, just go turn off the ones that you're not using. Like that can help. Um, Another thing that's indirect would be to just buy your food locally in like local supermarkets, and it could help to like reduce transportation. Like transportation uses energy, which like overall reduce the energy consumption in the U.S. of course. Um, the next one is called you who are your energy workers, and it just basically tells us that they're not literal workers and that generate our energy. And how there's natural resources like energy sources, and there's technology that turns these natural sources of energy into things that in which we use. The different types are like fossil fuels, like we know, oil, gas, coal, stuff like that, nuclear power, hydroelectric power, and renewable sources. Most of the energy used in the United States is actually comes from fossil fuels. There's and like the different technologies that turn natural energy into things that we use are like car engines and furnaces, etc. Um, the natural energy, like I said, is coal, oil, and natural gas, and energy flows, which is sunlight, wind, and moving water. One thing that I didn't know was actually a thing was garbage to energy, like a plant that's called garbage to energy. Like I didn't know that you could actually turn garbage into energy, but that's like such a big thing. Like if you have like think of all the garbage in the world and like think of if you turn all this garbage that is around into energy, like think of all the energy that could come from it. Like that's insane. Probably obviously probably not all garbage can be turned into energy, but that's like that's a big thing. Um I think anyways. Like it's seems good like a good idea to me. The next section is actually called What Energy Workers Buy Us, and it just talks about the importance of the relationship between both consumption of energy and quality of life, and how it's all determined on economic activity, and how higher energy goes with higher economic activity, which altogether comes to a better quality of life. Energy workers bring us both comfort and convenience because, like, without this stuff, it's like completely beyond our capability, and we wouldn't know how to turn these things into things that we use, of course. Quality of life is overall measured by economic activity, and this is when we're introduced to GDP, which is the total measure of economic activity, and how its relationship between energy consumption and the health of the economy. The last section of this chapter was the little thing at the end of the chapter, the little box is called Science Meets Policy, Energy and Quality of Life. This section just tells us about GDP and HDI and how they both are measurements of quality of life, but GDP uses all activities in the economy, both good and bad. And HDI is more inclusive because it talks about things like life expectancy and education. GDP, it goes with everything, like even the things that are not with quality of life, but HDI cannot pick up damaging things that like in the environment, like could take away from quality of life, you know. HDI has GDP like factors, just includes the things like I said, life expectancy and education. And like an initial increase in energy consumption can be like helpful to quality of life, but once it gets to a certain extent, like I said at the beginning, it can become harmful to many things. Then the last thing we're introduced to is called the saturation effect, and it's just basically the general term of this, like saying that an unseen amount or excessive amount of energy that is consumed will not help life expectancy and or quality of life. Like it could actually decrease the quality of life because of the negative impact that it could have on the environment. Overall, this chapter was just learning about how the difference of like how power and energy and how we use it and how it's helpful and harmful. Just it was overall like a good read, and I was glad that I got to learn more about things that I have had no idea about. Always interesting to learn new things. But that's it. Thank you so much.